What's up, everyone? Philly Insider, Hunter and Drew here. Been a while since we've been live, and there really hasn't been anything that's happened for the Phillies since then, which is very telling. And there's been a lot that's been happening for other teams, unfortunately. So the Phillies are a little bit behind the eight ball, I guess, right now. And I just want to ask Drew, how have you been feeling? We've had over a month to kind of decompress from the disaster that was the playoff collapse in the NLDS. And here we are. The Phillies really haven't done anything to make us feel better so far.
Yeah, I mean, you lose to the Mets in the playoffs, and then they get outed in the next round, and then they sign Juan Soto, and we're sitting here with our hands under our butt. Like, I don't really know. Like, there's no way to feel good about the Phillies, what they've done this offseason, because they haven't done anything. They made one signing. I don't even remember who it was, and it was a guy coming off an injury. So whatever, they need to sign like for sure players at this point. Like, their outfield is a disaster, and it's going to continue to be a disaster until they make a significant move. And I mean, I think everybody would have loved to see them get Kyle Tucker, but that was a big price to pay for a guy that's on a 1-year contract. So I don't really care that much, I guess, but it would have been nice.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Kyle Tucker was kind of like you didn't get Juan Soto. This is the other like, oh, come save our season type of deal, which again, I think the Phillies will still be very competitive this year. But at the same time, I just don't have any faith that they're a legit contender right now. And Kyle Tucker makes you that. But at the same time, like you said, it's 1 year of him. It's really hard to warrant trading a big name prospect. And I honestly, the more I thought about the Tucker offer, I was in the same boat as you go, Philly sports. I thought at first that the Cubs did not give up a lot. But the more you think about it, like, I don't know how to say Hayden's last name, but Hayden West, whatever his last name is, he does have a pretty decent arsenal. He's had pretty good numbers. He's kind of a hybrid starter or reliever. And going to the Astros, there's a pretty good chance that he's probably going to figure it out as a starter or reliever, whatever they need him as over there. Like, their pitching development is pretty strong. And then you have Isaac Paredes, who you then see the spray charts come out after the trade of how many home runs he would have hit in Minute Maid Park last year. It was a lot if you didn't see it. So that's a pretty good move for them. I think he's going to be pretty good there. I'm not saying these guys are going to be Kyle Tucker for them, but they also were probably not going to re-sign him. They really aren't big spenders unless it's someone, but it's usually a pitcher, I would say, because they signed Hader to a big deal. They signed Verlander to a pretty big deal at one point, I think. And I didn't think they were going to pay the $400 million. That's just not their MO. And for them to get those two out of it, and then also get, I think it was like a top 100 prospect, Cam, I forget what his last name is, but apparently Jack Fritz said he was kind of in between. He was like better than Justin Crawford, not as good as Aiden Miller, which again, that's the thing with the Phillies right now is they don't have those types of guys. And you see the Garrett Crochet deal too. I mean, the Red Sox kept what was listed as their top 3 prospects on MLB Pipeline, not always the most reliable source for ranking prospects, but they kept their top 3 guys and then gave up their 4th and 5th guys who were still pretty high caliber players in the minor league. So that's the thing is the Phillies have a couple guys they could trade. I don't think they want to trade Aiden at all. I wouldn't either, unless it's for a really, really darn good player. And as far as Crawford goes, I'm starting to get more convinced that he's going to be a pretty good player. But again, like, you trade him, you really don't have anyone else to trade after that because a lot of the other guys are unproven. Like Kaba and Tate are not really seasoned enough to draw that much interest. Like, they definitely could draw interest, but it's at the point where I'm like, I want to be protective of them early on. And I also don't think they have a ton of value to other teams, like a team like the Red Sox top 4 and 5 prospects would. So it's tough. You see these guys go, and I honestly look, I'm fine that they didn't pay the price for guys like Tucker, Crochet, and even like the Soto deal, that just went out of the stratosphere. That I did not expect that. I mean, I should have expected the price to go that high. I thought it would probably touch 700 million, but 760 is crazy. So it's like you can see like why they didn't make these moves, but at the same time, they haven't made any other moves. Like there's nothing else that's happened, and there's still plenty of time. But the options are becoming more limited as we speak, and a lot of stuff happened during the winter meetings. So I'm just not really sure what's next. Like you said, the outfield is so frustrating. I think we're all kind of done with the Brandon Marsh experiment because he doesn't hit left-handers. And you can argue they haven't given him enough reps, but I don't know if the reps would really make a big difference. And he has gotten some. Like, it's not like he's gotten 0 reps versus lefties. And I just don't know. Like, I don't think you can go into next year with him as your starting left fielder full time. You just can't have a platoon again. I really don't want to do that. You need to get a full-time starting outfielder out there. At this point, you need to sacrifice some defense for the bat. So whether that means, signing a guy like Profar or getting a guy like Seiya Suzuki, who really doesn't play left field, but has a really good bat, you may need to do that at this point. So I don't know, Drew. The options are becoming more limited. And like you said, they need an outfielder. It seems like the starting pitching market, they're really only in for a guy who would be a true difference maker there, which I'm fine with. I mean, that's really all you should be in the market for there. Your rotation's good. And then the bullpen, they add Romano, which is a fine move. I mean, again, you didn't spend anything for him. And, he's a low risk, high reward signing, but he could totally come in here and flop just because he's not the same guy as he was pre-injury. So I don't know. They still needed probably two more bullpen guys, I think. Just my opinion. I don't think they're quite set there. They probably think they only need one more. But I'm curious just kind of on all that. I talked about a lot, but just kind of where you are on the state of the team and what their needs are and who's out there too.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, they probably need at least two more bullpen guys for me to feel really good about it. One really good one would probably be fine, but it's few and far between. I mean, I saw they were trying to trade for Mason Miller with Alec Boehm, and the A's hung up the phone on him.
Yeah, that's not going to work, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean that'd be electric if they did that, but they're not going to trade prospects for a reliever. I don't think so. Unfortunately, you can pretty much kiss Mason Miller goodbye. So, yeah, I mean the outfield though, like you said, Brandon Marsh, that experiment's kind of done in my head, like you said, and I mean, last year was not, or this year, I guess, was not a good Brandon Marsh year. He was very underwhelming pretty much the entire season. He had his couple, good weeks or good days, whatever. But overall, it was just not a good season for Brandon Marsh. And I think the Phillies are a little bit lower on him now than they were this time last offseason.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like you said, Drew, I mean, this time last year, I was very hopeful for him. I was like, the strikeout rate is still high, but if he cuts that down a little bit, he's upped his walk rate a good bit. He's working better at bats, and he was making very good contact over the first year and a half with the Phils. And last year, I believe he was not 100% healthy at times last year, but at the same time, he wasn't the year before either. I mean, he had gotten hurt a few times, and he's another player. I mean, you could say this about almost anyone in the league, but he's definitely hot and cold. But this year, it just didn't really feel like the hot stretches were prolonged very much. And he was fine this year. It's just fine isn't going to get you a World Series title. It's not going to get you back to the World Series. And they need something better. I'm fine if him and Rojas share time in center. It's not really my ideal outcome for the upcoming year. I'm fine if that happens because that means that we have a full-time guy in left field. But yeah, again, Brandon Marsh is kind of the big thing. Is it doesn't sound like they're going to trade him either. So the only logical place for him to move is again, center field, just sharing time with Rojas, which it does sound like that is a possibility. But if they trot him out there in left field and Rojas is the starting center fielder next year, and their equation is just to run it back, they're not going to get a lot of butts in the seats next year like they have in the past. And there's going to be a lot of frustrated fans. But we can get to a few of these comments unless you have anything to add to that, Drew.
No, I mean, yeah, I only have really one thing to say about that. I mean, Johan is kind of the same way as Marsh is for me right now. I'm just kind of done with it. If it's going to be those two platooning in center field, I mean, I guess you're probably okay because, like you said, you have a full-time left fielder then. But I mean, you can't possibly run it back at the same outfield. They were the worst in baseball by probably a wide margin. I mean, the White Sox probably had a better outfield, and that tells you a whole lot. So
Yeah, they had some decent stretches from Tommy Pham early on, which we did not have. So, credit to Castellanos. Like, as much as I get frustrated with him, he was like the sole force in the outfield that kept us from probably being ranked 30th among outfielders in every stat imaginable. But that being said, excuse me, let's get to a few of these comments here. Neria, welcome all the way from Italy, says, let's be honest, Soto was the last type of player and contract we needed. I think the contract part, we can probably agree on that. That would have made things difficult. But at the same time, if we had gotten Soto, we all would have we'd be saying the opposite right now. The guy's a generational talent. I mean, he's still Juan Soto. And as far as the type of player, I mean, you'd kill to have that guy in any lineup.
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty simply just one of the 2 or 3 best hitters in baseball. It's really, there's no argument about it. As far as the contract goes, $765 million is insane. I mean, the Mets can have it at that point, I think, because
Yeah.
that could either be a major flop or it could be a major bargain at the end of that. But that's a steep, steep price to pay for a young guy that, I mean, he's had a few years under his belt, obviously, like 5 or 6, but you never know what somebody's going to look like when they start aging a little bit.
Yeah, and what if he gets hurt too? I mean, completely changes the outlook on it. So,
Yeah.
we'll see. Hey, not our contract though, so we can talk about that if we would like to. But
Yeah.
and like Go Philly Sports said, he's not Ohtani. It is pretty crazy he got up there
Hmm.
for that contract. And again, you're talking about a guy who pitches and hits at an elite level, and Ohtani didn't even pitch this year, and he was still the NL MVP. I mean, that's crazy. So, yeah.
10 WAR from the DH spot is crazy.
Yeah, it's remarkable to say the least.
Yeah.
that is we have not seen much like that before. And he also stole a lot more bases this year too. He was very active on the base path since he wasn't doing anything else. So if you don't let him pitch, he's going to make up for it in other areas. And now, if he comes back healthy and pitches for them and they manage him through a season, that's very scary. But anyway, I think we definitely are interested in the outfield. I feel like I've seen enough rumors and reports that they are looking around the trade market for an outfielder. But I just don't know. I don't know if it's going to be like a super exciting name. Hopefully it's a little more exciting than Austin Hayes, because you and me liked that deal, Drew, but it definitely wasn't like the exciting name I think we were hoping for. And then, obviously looking back on it, hindsight 2020, yeah, that definitely was not the name we were looking for at the deadline. And there's a reason he's a free agent now. So
Yeah.
I think we are interested. And there's a lot of comments. Before we get to the Bohm stuff, I do want to get your thoughts on this real quick, because I've seen a lot of people saying this, and we talked about it in our group chat too. Put Bryce back in right field and move Castellanos, sign Pete Alonso to play first base. You would be adding another big bat to the lineup. Welcome, Robert. We always appreciate your comments. Look, I mean, I'll let you go first. I think we're going to have the same opinion on this. I just don't think Bryce is going back to right field.
Yeah.
I have more to say than that, but I'll let you tackle this one first.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know. Like, I mean, I'd rather watch Pete Alonso try to play left field than Nick Castellanos, because as much trouble as he had learning right field, I can't even imagine it. Like,
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, Pete Alonso's a good hitter. He's not like one of the best, but he's up there.
Yeah.
I don't think you can take Bryce off of first base. I mean, he's one of the best first basemen in baseball, defensively and offensively. And he wasn't even at 100% full health most of this season. It didn't seem like. So I just don't see a world where they would do that. I mean, I would be okay being wrong, because Alonso would definitely add something to the lineup, and there's no doubt about it. Everybody hates him here, but if they would bring him here, probably be the opposite. I don't know.
The thing, I think I said this in our group chat, like the biggest draw of that to me is like not even the actual talent side of it. It's just screw the Mets. I mean, that would just be the biggest like middle finger to the Mets if they could go get Pete Alonso and put him out there. Like that would be awesome. From an offensive perspective, like you said, Drew, undoubtedly would help us. I mean, you get a true 4-hitter in that lineup, a guy who is a real power threat, who's coming off a really good postseason. And compared to Christian Walker, he's 3 years younger. So he's 30 years old. Christian Walker's undoubtedly the better defensive first baseman. I mean, it miles apart on that front. And the other thing is Christian Walker isn't too far off of him offensively. You could argue maybe there is a decent gap there, but point being, he's a good offensive player. That being said, then he's also 3 years older than Pete. So it's an interesting conversation with those two. Again, I think it's a moot point, because I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think they're moving Bryce off of first base. I think you're risking a lot by putting Bryce back out there. He's gotten hurt the last couple times he's been out there, and he's already had a couple scares just bumping into guys running to first base as a hitter. Like, I don't really want to risk that. And like you said, Castellanos, not a natural left fielder at this point. He's become comfortable enough in right field to play it serviceably. Your defense would be horrendous. And obviously you're going to be paying for the offense to be better. You're probably going to get more out of the offense than you would the defense being a detriment. Like it's going to be more positive, a net positive, than it will be a net negative. But I don't think it's realistic. So, but it is an interesting conversation. And Christian Walker is an interesting conversation too, since he does make your defense very good at first. But even at that, it's like you're essentially making a lateral defensive move at first base because Bryce is already a really good defensive first baseman. So
Yeah.
and you're doing that to risk his health.
Yeah, and if you want, like, this isn't me moving on to the Alec Boehm comments, but
Go for it.
if you want to protect Bryce's long-term health, you got to get Alec Boehm off of third base because he's throwing balls right into the baseline a lot.
Yep.
So, but back to the first baseman conversation a little bit. Christian Walker, like, obviously he's had a very good last couple of years, but before that, he wasn't like some standout, like guaranteed 30 home run guy like he has been the last couple of years. And I don't know, maybe it's just a flash in the pan and it's not really real. So this year was definitely worse for him than last year. That just kind of worries me a little bit. So I definitely would not be in on that move.
Yep. Yeah, that's a very fair point. And Luke says to keep Bryce at first, keep him healthy long term. And Luke, I do see your comment on the other outfielders. I'm going to get to that. But Drew did mention Alec Boehm, and we have like 3 Alec Boehm trade comments here. So I do want to get to those. Would you do Alec Boehm for Seiya Suzuki straight up? That would probably be a no for me. I think offensively, it's kind of a lateral move. I think Seiya, I would probably put him above Boehm offensively just a little bit in certain areas. But you could also argue Boehm is better than him in other areas. And I don't know. I forget how many years. I think they have similar years left. I want to say Seiya might have more because he came over more recently. But I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily worth it. Then you're just replacing. You're moving one. You're getting one hole and then just you're building another hole elsewhere. Like you're filling one hole and then creating another hole elsewhere. I just don't think that makes a ton of sense. And that's probably what the Cubs would ask for because they just lost Paredes too. So
yeah,
it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, Seiya's not a great outfielder. Like he's not even like a good outfielder. So if you want to put somebody out there that's not going to play good fielding but is going to hit the ball, just put Kyle Schwarber in left field and sign a guy to play DH.
Yeah,
pretty simple. I mean, if you want to do that, just sign Pete Alonso and put him at DH and put Kyle Schwarber back out and left.
Yeah, exactly. And then hopefully trade Boehm for an outfielder. Go Philly Sports says, and then Nerio says, on top of that, you can't expect to shop Boehm and get a huge return. And that's been another storyline of this offseason, Drew, is I think it's a combination of you're not going to get a massive return from Alec Boehm, and the Phillies are reportedly asking for ridiculous returns for it, like not just like good returns. I mean, you can't expect to call up the Mariners and ask for Logan Gilbert and George Kirby and call up the A's and ask for Mason Miller when you're shopping out. Like that's like, and I'm going to out myself here. Like in my fantasy leagues, I always offered ridiculous trades. And I'm like, well, you got to start in the negotiation somewhere. Well, yeah, you also don't want them to hang up the phone and be done with you after the first offer either. So you got to also start from like a semi-realistic talking point too. But that's been an interesting storyline, I think. And then Rob comes out on MLB Network during the winter meetings and says, we're not shopping him. Like, we're holding on to Boehm, which very much to me feels like damage control because you shopped him all offseason and it's out there. So it seems like, well, we couldn't get rid of him. We couldn't get a package we liked, so we're going to bring him back. Like, that's what it seems like. That's where they're at with the Boehm thing at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like beating a dead horse at this point because if he comes back, he's going to be pretty much the same player he was this year, I think. I mean, he's going to give you a lot of RBIs, a lot of doubles, because he's going to be hitting the middle of the lineup pretty simply. So, I mean, I'm okay with it if he comes back because he was a productive player. That would be that's crazy if that's actually what they're asking for. Yeah, but
who knows if it's true or not?
Yeah, I mean, these reports. I mean, they could literally be saying anything, so it's hard to say. But if he comes back, I mean, it's not like the end of the world or anything. But you do need to make another move to get an outfielder, regardless. And if you're trading Alec Boehm for an outfielder, you're going to need a third baseman. So you're kind of just creating a hole to fill a hole. I don't know. I'd rather just keep him and sign an outfielder or trade for an outfielder with prospects.
Yeah, I'm with you on that too. Again, Boehm is he's projected to cost you like $8 million in arbitration this upcoming year, and you still have him next year too. And he's still a really good player. I mean, granted, I know the collapse happened. I'm not saying he is exactly what we need right now. I don't think he should be the 4-hitter, but to me, that's more of an issue of the way that the team is constructed rather than Alec Boehm, because I think Alec Boehm should probably be a 6-hitter. And if they would have actually gone out and gotten an outfield bat to be the 4-hitter, they probably wouldn't be in this predicament right now. So to me, that's less of a Boehm problem. I do get frustrated with Boehm sometimes, and I certainly was calling for him to be traded right after that series. I mean, yeah, the emotions got to me for sure, and I was certainly feeling it. But having some time to think about it logically, I mean, I don't think it would make a ton of sense to deal him on the deal he's on and with what he gives you at that price. And your solution at that point is you either, if you trade Bohm for an outfielder or a reliever, then we need to go either try to trade for a third baseman and fill that role. That's, I guess, one of the options, not option A, but like option one. Option two is you have Edmundo Sosa play there the whole year, which to me is just going to be a whole year of mid. I love Edmundo Sosa, but there's a reason he is in his role as a utility guy. Like, there's a reason he was filling in for Trey and playing well during that stretch, and why they would have never trusted him to play full time and just like to move him out to left field for the rest of that season. That would not have worked.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then option C is you either sign Ha-Seong Kim or Alex Bregman, which one, not even a guarantee you could even get either of those guys. And two, Ha-Seong Kim is not necessarily like, he can play third base very well, but I would imagine he probably wants to play shortstop on his next deal. And also Bregman, it's a lot of money for a guy who's aging and declining. Yes, one of the best postseason hitters, but ever since the scandal, his numbers have gotten worse. So anyway, that's my little rant on that. But yeah, I just don't think it just does not make a ton of sense to deal Bohm, even though he probably has some value.
Yeah. I mean, another guy that like people aren't talking about, like, yeah, I kind of agree with Ian. Like, Bohm's attitude's pretty terrible sometimes.
It is. 100%.
Yeah. I mean, his value for his contract is, you're not going to beat it. But speaking of another guy that's kind of on a cheap contract because it's still like a rookie contract, is Bryson Stott. I mean, he was terrible this year, and people aren't talking about it. He was so bad compared to last year. And I mean, I think that was a huge reason for why the Phillies had struggles in the playoffs, because he was a zero. He did nothing. And it was all season. He was obviously, they said he was dealing with some kind of elbow issue. But, I mean, I don't know. It was a terrible year for him. He plays good defense, but you got to hit the ball.
100%. And I think for him, he's kind of at a weird, like, I guess, like a weird ceiling right now potential ceiling where it's this past year, he got on base at a pretty similar clip to the year before and walked a lot this year, but he was very, very patient at the plate and watched a lot of good pitches go by. Whereas the year before, he was definitely in attack mode. Didn't see it. I don't think, maybe I'm wrong. I would say off the top of my head, did not see as many pitches the year before, but he sprayed the field. He wasn't even making super hard contact. He was just putting the barrel on the ball and just spraying the field the year before, which is fine. I mean, that's fundamental hitting. I mean, that's one way to get it done. And there's a lot of different player types that can get the job done for you. But I guess he's kind of at a weird point where it's like, you're not essentially like the year, you'd prefer the year before, and that's very good value for him if you're going to get what he was the year before. But either way, if that year before is his ceiling, like you're kind of at a weird spot where it's like, you kind of need to find a middle ground, I guess, between him walking at not like the same clip he was this year, but probably a similar clip if you can, while also hitting the same way he was the year before, which I don't know if it's possible to mix those two, because it seemed like two different approaches the past 2 years. And I don't know. I think we all knew, like, after year one of him, like, there was a lot of promise, but he probably did have an offensive ceiling. I thought it was going to be a little higher than what I think it is right now, but I'm very curious to see what happens with him. I think a lot of people are content with him just because, again, he gets on base and he plays really good defense. So he has a lower floor, I guess, than some of the other daycare guys, but I don't know. He's in an interesting spot right now because they're going to be shuffling some pieces in a couple of years when Aiden is ready, because obviously we don't know if Aiden is going to be that guy. I think we all believe he can be, though. And you can say that Bowman Stott were talked about like Aiden. Sure, that's a fair point, but I don't know. Aiden's been talked about. They've talked about him quite highly. I would say more so than those two guys. And maybe that's recency bias. That could be, but it seems like everyone in that organization believes he is going to be a starter within a couple of years in the big leagues. And we will see how he does. I'm sure he'll get off to a slow start and figure it out. But point being, if he is going to be that guy who we think he could be, there's going to be an odd man out at one position or another. And there's going to be some shuffling of pieces. And this upcoming year, I mean, if Marsh, Stott, and Bohm are all back, which I would hope not all three of them. I would hope two of the three of them are back, but I think we're probably going to have all three of them back. If they're all three back, which I think is probably most likely, you got to step up and prove that you belong here beyond this year. I mean, this is a big prove it year for all those guys. And I think Bohm out of the three of those will be the safest just because he has such a high floor too. But I don't know. You definitely bring up an interesting point with Stott there.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely worrisome because if he plays this coming year like he played this year, it's just going to be it's not going to be good for the Phillies because you need more out of him.
Yep, definitely. And I did see this, Robert. I think me and Drew are a hard no on this, most likely. I don't want to speak for you, Drew, but
No, yeah,
that's
it's
my opinion.
definitely no from me. He's aging, he's bad, and his contract's even worse. So,
Yeah. And
I'm
he
out.
wanted to go to the Angels were one of his 6 teams too. So that is enough for me to be like, yeah, no thanks. No,
Yeah.
thank you, sir. Had his time in the league, was really fun to watch, but that time is really just like that feels very far in the distance, which is really not, but it's not coming back. I mean,
Yeah.
that would not there's no outfielder we could sign or like trade for that's available right now where I would be like, yeah, it's worth moving Bohm to then get this guy in the outfield and then replace him with Arenado at third base. Like that would just be such a loss in my eyes. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah, that guy in left field would have had to have been Juan Soto or Kyle Tucker, and
correct.
it's not going to be. So,
yep. And then Luke asks about free agent outfielders. I want to get your thoughts on this because we've definitely talked about Teoscar before. I want to say we have. I want to say we talked about him last offseason when we were starting up the pod. But I've talked a lot about Profar in like our Discord and in our group chat, Drew. I haven't really talked about him a lot on the pod so far. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on these two guys. And that's why I think the Phillies, you can't just rule out, like you can't just be like, we're just going to trade for a guy. Like, maybe they just don't like these two guys, but I think both of them could provide value to the team. So I think you have to at least consider them. But I'm curious your thoughts on them.
yeah, I mean, Profar is pretty much a hard no for me because it was a 1-year deal where he was good, and I definitely don't trust him long term because he was terrible before this year. Pretty frankly, he was not very productive at all, no matter where he was or where he was batting in the lineup or anything like that. So I have no faith in him long term, and I'm assuming that's why he's still a free agent because he had an incredible year. And if he was actually that good, he'd already have a team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as far as Profar goes, I do like him a bit, so I'm kind of on the opposite side of that coin. I saw that Fernando Tatis Sr. apparently had a swing adjustment with him, and I think his stance is a lot different now. He looks a lot more comfortable too, and the age is definitely a concern. I don't know if he can replicate what he did this past year. I do think even before this past year, I think the draw for me is just that he puts the ball in play and gets on base at a high clip, which you need a lot more than that to be successful in the league. But I think that's just something this lineup has lacked is guys who are actually going to make contact with the ball when they're making outs and I think to me, that does matter because that out could be a sac fly or that out could also be a ground out that moves a runner over, or I don't know. It could also be an error. Like you give yourself a shot. Errors don't happen too often, but you give yourself a shot to get on first base if you put the ball in play. And he also gets on base a decent bit. Now, granted, he's not necessarily a huge weapon on the base paths, and I do think he's really poor defensively. But I think he'd be okay defensively in Citizens Bank Park. So I'm in on Profar if they can get him on like a 2-3 year deal. Nothing beyond that. Even that is a little bit much, but if they can get him for a decent price just because teams are a little scared and his market doesn't shape up, I think that would make sense. But I honestly think he's going to end up back with San Diego. I don't see why he wouldn't. And I think that just makes too much sense for both sides. I mean, he's had the most success of his career has come when he's played in San Diego. And they just got a really good year out of him. Why wouldn't you just run it back and see if you can do that again with them? So, and then I'll go on Teoscar and then let you go on him. I just don't think he has interest in the Phillies, to be honest. I think he is either dead set on going back. I think he's dead set on going back to LA. And if that doesn't happen, I think he's dead set on going to Boston. I think those are his two options right now. I think the Phillies are definitely interested. Apparently they reached out. I forget who reported that, but he would be great. I mean, look, he chases quite a bit. I don't think he's the most disciplined bat, but at the same time, the power is undeniable. And even though you would think with how much he chases, at some point he would start declining, but he puts up the same numbers every year. He had a couple big playoff hits this year too. He's not a really good defensive outfielder, but he has a strong arm, so that makes up for it a little bit. Yeah, the power's undeniable. I mean, that's a threat in the 4-hole behind Bryce Harper. You have to recognize that. So if there was mutual interest, sure, why not? I mean, if the price is right, I would do it. I think after this past year, he's probably due a decent price tag, though, that the Phillies might not be comfortable paying. And again, I don't think he wants to come here.
Yeah, I don't really see the fit because of the massive amount of swing and miss that he has. That's just kind of always drawn me away from him. I mean, obviously he's very productive, and that's going to be great for another team or whoever if he goes back to LA, whatever. He's obviously a very productive player, but I just don't think it's a great fit for the Phillies. I mean, if they signed him, I'd be happy about it because
Sure.
obviously he puts up, like you said, the same or relatively the same numbers every single year, and he would be pretty good protection for Bryce. So I don't think I would hate it if they signed him, but I wouldn't be like over the moon, like jumping out of my seat.
Sure. That's fair. And I do want to get to this because this is an interesting, and I see Chris, you're here. I'm not ignoring you. Welcome in, brother. And Nerio asks, how much do you trust the farm system given Dombrowski's apparent immobility so far? And I think my quick answer to this is I really think in a year or two, the farm system's going to be even better. I think it's already improved under Dombrowski. It's just tough because, again, like I said earlier, with teams like Boston in that Crochet trade, and then the Cubs giving up a guy, the prospect they did, who's better than Crawford but not as good as Aiden. Like other teams have more of those guys. Like we only have the only two guys that ever come up when we're talking trades is Miller and Crawford, and people just laugh now when Abel gets mentioned. Unfortunately, like he has to have a bounce back year to have value again, and he's still young. Like he still could. I'm not out on him. Like Griff McGarry having a downfall did not help either. Like that's another guy who's out. And then again, Tait and Kaba are just so young. It's just risky to trade for them for either side right now. And they just don't have like the top 100 guys, I think, to trade with right now. But I think in a year or two that they may have that may be a different story, and they may actually have the assets to go make a big move like that. And unfortunately, like that's kind of good timing. And I hate to say this, but this might just be a throwaway year. Like I really hate to say that. This might just be a year where you make the playoffs, get eliminated wild card round, and you just have to regroup and just figure it out the next year. And who knows? Things can happen. I'm not saying that this year's just a lost year, but it kind of feels that way right now. So maybe that's for the best that they won't be able to make a real big splash until an off season or two later.
Yeah, I mean the farm, like you said, it's already improved quite a bit from whenever Dombrowski took over, but it's not his fault in any way that it's not as good as a lot of other teams because when he came in, we had nothing. We had literally nothing. I don't even remember who our best prospect was, but it was bad. I'm pretty sure Scott Kingery was on the top 10.
Yeah, thank goodness we traded Sixto Sanchez in the JT deal too. That worked out.
That was he's terrible. What a disaster.
That was the guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's worked out very well for us, obviously. And I saw Chris asked about JT and like what they're thinking for the future. Like I have no idea. It's the free agent catching market next year is terrible. It couldn't be worse, really. So you're either trading for a guy or you're re-signing JT.
Yeah, and that's the frustrating thing because JT, like Luke said, he's declining right now, and that's undeniable. JT is not the same player. He hasn't been the same player for the last couple seasons now. But can you upgrade? I don't know if you really can, and it's just a tough position to find talent at right now. There's very few really good catchers around the league. Everyone who has one isn't going to give them up. Like you're not moving them unless you were the White Sox with one of them.
Yeah, and even then, JT's not JT anymore, and he's still a top 5 catcher. So it just tells you how bad the catching market is and where that position is. It's kind of like I don't know what to compare it to. Like I won't even try to compare it, but I thought I had a comparison in my head, and I don't. Regardless, it's bad. Like there's not many good ones.
It's not the same value as the quarterback position in the NFL. Obviously, completely different positions. I mean, the quarterback position is maybe the most important position in all sports. But as far as like finding a good option, there's limited options there for sure. I would say the catching market is more limited than the quarterback market, just in my opinion. But there's really not a lot of guys right now. And like this is the thing. People have been saying O'Hoppe, like, I don't know. I don't know if O'Hoppe was really just the answer. Like he's looked okay with the Angels. Yeah, he strikes out a lot, Drew. He chases a lot too. and he was never heralded for his defensive ability. And maybe he gets better. He's very young. I just don't know that that's like the surefire. Oh, if we had just kept him and replaced JT with him, like I don't know if that's the perfect answer.
No, I mean, he's obviously not a bottom 10 catcher, but he's definitely not top 10 at this point. So
No,
he's somewhere in the middle, and that'd be a gigantic downgrade from JT. Even though JT is declining, like I said, he's still one of the top catchers in baseball, and it's hard to like remember that because of how good he was. He was obviously the best catcher in baseball for 3 years whenever we had him. So we were just kind of spoiled by that, and to like fault him for his decline at age 33 or whatever it is, it's just doesn't feel right to me.
Mm-hmm. And I think you saw, like, while the offense was kind of like they got some offense from Marchand, which I don't think is super sustainable over, a longer stretch. Do like Marchand, but they got some offense from him. But I think you also saw what was missing from the pitching staff without JT there too. I think there was a reason. There was definitely some noticeable difference without JT behind the dish from the pitchers, and not all the time. I mean, I'm not saying that's not a direct correlation, but I think it's fair to say that could have played a part in it for sure. So, yeah, I don't know. The catching position is really tough right now. And again, like, people say Marchand, but you're not putting Marchand out there for more than like 50, 60 games at this point. And his body might not allow him to be out there for that because he's never been healthy. So
yeah,
I don't know, man. They're in a very interesting spot, but I also think that there's a lot of other teams who envy the spot they're in to an extent, just because they don't have any option at that position. So
yeah.
I'm not like, that's not the biggest thing I'm concerned about. It definitely is a concern with just the way the core was built. I mean, that's the direction a lot of these guys are trending in, unfortunately. But again, JT is still like a very solid catcher, I would say, at the worst.
Yeah, I mean, he can still gun down some runners at the very least. So it's definitely like we're kind of still like riding the high of when he was the best. So it's kind of disappointing to see him the way he is now, but he's still very good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And just to go back to Teoscar real quick, Robert says the Dodgers got about as much out of Teoscar Hernandez. Does he have anything left to fully sign him? Yeah, I mean, again, I think this is what Teoscar's kind of done for multiple years now. Like, he's essentially been the same player, I would say. Like, I was interested in him at the 2023 deadline as a trade candidate. And again, like, maybe he declines at some point. He's getting older for sure. Like, he's not old, but he's getting older. But again, he's done the same thing. So I don't think there's much reason to believe that I don't know if he's going to do what he did with the Dodgers this past year, but I think he can do what he did with the Mariners and what he did with the Blue Jays. I think he'll still do that, and that could still be of value to a number of teams. So,
yeah, I don't see him getting a long contract either. So
no,
it's going to be a good 1 or 2 year deal for whoever signs him, I think. But if you're signing him for anything beyond 1 or 2 years, it's very risky.
Yeah, I would have really liked Conforto. I felt like he was kind of overlooked by a lot of people looking at the outfield market. He hits lefties decently well in his career. He was really limited by the park in San Francisco. I think in Citizens Bank, he would have a field day with that right field wall. And he's not really a good defensive guy, but I think he'd be fine in left field in Citizens Bank. And yeah, I think he was decent. Like, his numbers were decent the past couple of years. I think he was a little better than his numbers too. He played really well on the road, which again shows you that the park was probably an impact or a negative impact for him. And he went he got $17 million, but he only got 1 year. So that was a deal I probably would have been willing to do. I think Tyler O'Neill got like 3 years, $45 million. I was less high on him than I have been in the past. Like, I really wanted O'Neill last offseason and then the deadline before that offseason. He struck out a lot more this past year. He's not the same defender he was. I probably would have taken him at that price. I would have been willing to do that, but I certainly wouldn't have gotten in a bidding war for him at the same time. So again, like, there's a couple what ifs I think out there with Conforto and O'Neill. While there were options on the outfield market, I don't think it's a super robust market either outside of Soto. And then, as far as Tucker for a trade, but I don't know. They're definitely down to what? I mean, Profar's out there, Teoscar's out there. We talked about them. You could bring in Tommy Pham and hope he does something this year. I just don't think that's going to happen. And that's after Tommy Pham, which is already a drop off from those two guys to Tommy Pham. And then after Tommy Pham, I believe there's an even more significant drop off. So, You then look to trades, which we talked about, Seiya Suzuki, who I would be down with that. Again, I don't have much confidence in him playing left field, but I think the bat is there. If they can get him without giving up too much, I would be down with that. I guess Taylor Ward, I really am not super interested in him at this point, but I guess he'd be fine. I mean, there's Jake McCarthy. I just really am not the highest on Jake McCarthy. I think I'd be fine with that. If it's Jake McCarthy or run it back, sure, whatever. Like, go get Jake McCarthy. But, I mean, those are the names. And maybe Lars Nootbaar, but I think he would cost a decent bit just because there's still potential there. Like, there's not a lot of guys available. There's just not, at least that we know of. And I've looked at a lot of different names. I mean, Luis Robert, if you can get him for cheap, but I don't think the White Sox are going to sell low on him right now. And he also had almost as bad of a second half as Rohan Rojas' first half. So, Anyway, point being, there's just not, unfortunately, there's really not any options right now. And I'm very curious because I think they will end up with someone there. But yeah, that's really all I have to say on it, Drew, is it's depleted right now. There's not, and that's the way it's been the past 3 years. There's been no outfield options for them.
Yeah, there's been one or two very, very high-end signings at the beginning of the offseason. And then after that, it's just a whole bunch of players that aren't even guaranteed roster spots, in my opinion. So
yeah,
it's like, I don't know. It's not very exciting right now.
No, it's not. I mean, what's the plan? Do you go get Ramon Laureano and just platoon him with Marsh? That's not going to be sustainable over the whole year. And I don't think he's going to play as well as he did with the Braves, which was surprising. He even played. To say he played well with the Braves is even surprising. So, yeah, it's rough. Chris said, assuming we strike out on Roki and run it back, 2026 is Tucker season. So would you be open to signing Kyle Tucker to a $400 million deal in free agency next year?
I don't think so. That's another gigantic contract that the Phillies definitely don't want. Yeah. So I think if they're going to sign a guy, it's going to be like Roki Sasaki. It's going to be a big contract, but it's a very young guy that has very high potential. And Kyle Tucker, it's he's already established, so he's going to cost exactly what he's worth. So you can probably get some kind of bargain with Roki a little bit, but I don't see them going for another $400 million contract. I just can't see it.
It's a fair point. I mean, I would manage it just because I do think Tucker is unbelievable, but at the same time, like you said, and Chris mentioned this in Discord, you then have Trey Turner, Kyle Tucker, and Bryce Harper on $300+ million deals for X amount of years, probably over 10 years each, which is scary. I mean, and Chris talked about this, and me and Drew talked about this before the stream. That Trey contract is looking pretty rough right now. The defense, I knew the defense was going to be a detriment coming in. I certainly didn't think it would be as bad as it's been, though. And the offense, while his floor is still better than a lot of other shortstops, you're paying him to do a lot more than what he's doing right now. And that's the big issue. You wouldn't be in this situation right now, sitting here where we are, if Trey was performing like he's supposed to. But he's a chase machine. Castellanos, while he performed better than Trey in that playoff series, undoubtedly, for sure. I always have to preface that with Castellanos because he did step up in big spots last year. He's also a chase machine too. But the Trey thing is even worse with him because he's on a longer deal and he's supposed to be better than Castellanos is. And Castellanos, while, he hasn't lived up to his contract or what he was before he signed that deal, at the same time, he's still – he's not like the Tobias Harris level that people compare him to with the Sixers where that guy became a net zero at the end. Castellanos has still come through in some pretty big moments. He's still been I would say he's been a slightly above average player here.
Yeah, and he's fine in the postseason most of the time. He had a horrible series in that NLCS against the Diamondbacks, but – outside of that, he's been a good postseason player for you, and that's definitely valuable in some way.
Yeah, and Trey was not this year. Trey definitely had some big moments the year before. NLCS was not kind to him after Game 2, but he had some moments there. This year, I mean, he was really he had a couple base hits, I think, got on base a few times, but granted, I know Trey Turner, the speed is a big thing, but you're paying him because of his combination of speed and power and his ability to get extra base hits. I don't know. It just didn't feel like it was there with him this year. He had a really strong start to the year and then nothing after that. So that's, I think, even more glaring than the daycare guys have had their issues for sure. They're young. That's going to happen. But those issues are going to become even more glaring when Trey plays like he did this past year. Yeah, I mean, that's really the biggest issue to me right now is, unfortunately, it's Trey, and I think it's just going to come down. And it's not even like, look, I know everyone gets tired of hearing that he went in the cage after like a bad game. I don't think it's a lack of effort. I really don't. I think he does want to be better, and sure, maybe sometimes his answers come off as very very cocky or big time. But I do think he wants to get better. I just think it's not working right now. So I don't know. Maybe that's a Kevin Long thing too. There's a lot of weird things, a lot of things to try to figure out with that, but I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, I mean, not just anybody can walk into the ballpark and be as good as Bryce Harper like he is. So,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously Bryce puts in a ton of work. I'm definitely not discounting that, but he's pretty simply just gifted. There's really no other way to put it. He's a special player if he just walks in with no warm-ups or nothing. So,
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and as far going back to Rojas too, I meant to mention this earlier. I really don't want to hear about his winter league stats. Like, I did. That is just not going to change my opinion on him going into this season. And I was talking to Ian about it the other day, and I was like, I think he got like just over a 700 OPS last year, and I misremembered. It was barely over a 600 OPS. Massive difference between those two. Yeah, I just that experiment. I think I've had enough of that. Chris, who's in the comments right now, actually mentioned an interesting idea, which they did. I think it was Preston Mattingly said Justin Crawford needs to go into camp thinking there's a spot up for grabs, which I love that. I don't know if Justin Crawford's going to go out and play well enough to get that spot, but he's certainly, I think he's played better than we all expected him to, especially in Double A. I did not expect him to play as well as he did. And Chris mentioned an interesting idea in the chat, which was platoon Crawford and Rojas, so you protect them both from the opposite side of the plate, which Rojas doesn't really damage lefties a ton, consistently at least, but that would at least give Crawford favorable matchups. And you really don't lose any defense there, and they're both, obviously, they both have wheels on base paths too. Interesting idea to me. I don't know, like that is definitely something I didn't really consider. And again, it all comes down to if Crawford's going to be healthy and if Rojas can last that long too. But I don't know. That's an interesting concept.
Yeah, definitely interesting. But yeah, I mean, I don't really have a whole lot to add about Crawford because we just haven't seen that much of him at a higher level. So it's kind of hard to say.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a big question mark right now what he's going to be, and it'll be one of those things where it's like, maybe we'll ask like if they should have traded him at his value, like height of his value at some point, or maybe they traded it. Maybe if they do trade him, we'll say they traded him too early, or I don't know. There's a lot of things that could happen with that. So just kind of got to wait and see with him. But yeah, Robert, it's like the only reason I think we all as fans said was, well, maybe they could help lure Soto in with Kevin Long, which obviously they didn't even come close. I mean, they didn't even have a shot at Soto. Like, we all thought they were going to at least be in the mix for him. I mean, that was not even remotely close. They were never in it from the jump of the reports that were coming out when he was negotiating. So outside of that, I don't really know. Like, there's not a lot of reason to believe in Kevin Long going into this upcoming year, unfortunately, which a year ago we were singing a much different tune on him. But I don't know, man. It's gotten better under him, but I don't know if it's good enough. I don't know who they could get that's better. I don't know baseball coaches like that. But I definitely think there are some issues there.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some kind of approach issue and a lack of a plan a lot of the time, it seems. So
that's for sure.
I don't know. Like you said, I don't know if there's an upgrade out there, like an obvious upgrade, which there probably isn't because that person would have a job. So
yeah, right.
It's just, I don't know. Anything you do is just gonna kind of seem like a lateral move until you see better results.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah. Shout out that Chris guy. I don't know where he is right now, but definitely some interesting ideas. So don't always agree with all of them, but they're definitely interesting. So we appreciate you, Chris. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about from this offseason. There hasn't been too much else that's been going on other than what we've talked about. Max Fried went to the Yankees for like a lot of money, which I don't know. You and me, I don't think are like big believers in him. I think that's a pretty massive deal for Max Fried. Yeah, I can't think of too much. Well, Devin Williams also got traded to the Yankees too, which was interesting. And Nestor got thrown to Milwaukee in that deal. So poor guy. But yeah, those were like the only other notable moves I can think of off the top of my head. I guess just, I don't know, like the rotation, it seems like we talked about, they're willing to add a Crochet or a Roki Sasaki, like those types of guys that become available. that are elite and would 100% make the rotation better, which if you sign a free agent of that caliber, that doesn't mean Ranger has to go. But I think in most of those scenarios, it means Ranger's probably not coming back, which is interesting. He's been a really good postseason pitcher, but at the same time, I think if you can get one of those types of guys, which obviously Crochet is off the table now, but if you could get Roki Sasaki, I don't think you would miss Ranger all that much. And love Ranger. I mean, he's definitely one of my favorite Phillies, but I can understand if they do want to move on. And he is injury prone. He's not always out there. And he did have a really, really poor end of the season. Outside of the playoff start, he really battled and gave us all he had to get out of those jams. But Roki's interesting because there is a max. I think there's like a cap on how much money he could get. And I ultimately think he's probably going to end up on the West Coast. And I think they're just entertaining East Coast teams to just feel the market out. And it's crazy they're having a meeting with the White Sox. So they really are willing to meet with anyone, which is something else. So that means the Phillies may have a shot if they want a meeting with him. I mean, if they could get Seiya Suzuki, that would probably be a help. You can't just trade for him just because you want to try to get Roki Sasaki, because then if you get Suzuki and then you don't get Sasaki, it's like, well, what do we make that move for? But I would be fine with Suzuki either way. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they could do to get Sasaki to be interested in the Phillies the most. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think he's probably going to the Padres or the Dodgers. They each have, I mean, the Padres have Darvish who could team up with. Obviously, the Dodgers have Yamamoto and Ohtani. They could build a super team over there. They already have, but they could just add to the super team. And it's closer to home. I think the Dodgers have more in signing bonus to offer him. I'm not sure. There's a lot of things out there, but I would ask you like what your thoughts are on Sasaki, but like that's kind of a dumb question to ask because he's obviously probably one of the best pitchers in the world if he pans out like he should, and he already is. He already might be. But do you think there's a realistic possibility they could get him?
I don't know. They tried very hard last year whenever Yamamoto was on the market, so it's definitely a possibility. But I mean, it's probably not a high possibility.
Yeah, and to your point, Drew, they were in the mix for that till the end. Like I think they were like the mystery team that was hanging around. And Dombrowski said they offered more than people probably thought we did, which I don't know what that means, but maybe that was just to, get in good graces with the international market for the future. Like if they can get Murakami next year, I don't know. But yeah, they were in that. Like the Soto thing, they were obviously not mentioned at all. Yamamoto, they were very much in on him, and they were willing to go. I think the price that he got, they probably were willing to pay. I don't doubt that. So yeah, it's interesting, man. And like Robert said, the West Coast teams are always just going to be attractive to the Japanese players, and it makes sense too. And yeah, Chris, hopefully 15 more years of failure for the Mets. I think that my biggest thing is like the Cowboys need to be bad and the Mets need to be bad. And it kills me that Mets got one over on us in the playoffs and then get Juan Soto. So I really hope that blows up in their faces because it didn't for the Dodgers this past year. They got Ohtani and won the whole thing. So hopefully everyone can just team up and stop the Mets at all costs. They don't have the roster the Dodgers did. The rotation does not scare me. Kodai Senga is coming off an injury, and we'll see how he looks over a full year again. Clay Holmes is one of the starters. That makes zero sense to me. I know he's been talked about as a starter before, but that doesn't scare me very much. And I'm blanking on the rest of the rotation right now, but the rotation isn't like super scary to me at the moment. That being said, they have the money to do whatever they want, but they also they paid so much money for Soto. Like you aren't guaranteed to bring Pete Alonso back. And if you do, that limits what you can do elsewhere. Like even them, you can only spend so much with, there's only so much you are realistically willing to spend for all these players. And I think also part of that is they spent for Scherzer and Verlander and it backfired on them big time. So they're going to be a little more cautious this time around, but I don't know. It's going to be interesting kind of how they build their team moving forward too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they have some great pieces, obviously. So
yeah,
it's definitely going to be interesting how much money they're willing to spend.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and then I guess the Braves haven't done a ton, I don't think. Traded Soler, and then I think they waived Griffin Canning after they got him. That was just move some money, and then they lost Max Fried. So they haven't really done – I don't know if they've made any signings yet. I think they lost Darno too. So, yeah, they haven't really done anything significant. So we'll see if they do anything. But, yeah, it's going to be an interesting year, Drew, and there's going to be a lot to talk about. We'll probably be doing shorter videos. If you guys have suggestions for those, let us know. Probably on potential trade targets, free agent targets, because again, the only move we missed while we were gone was the Jordan Romano signing. That is literally it. They've done nothing else, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's a quieter offseason, but we will be doing more content. So I don't know, Drew, is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we sign off here? Like, I think we touched on just about everything, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered pretty much everything there is to cover at this point. We really haven't had a whole lot of reports, so
Yeah.
it's gonna be interesting to see how things pan out.
Yeah. Like you said, not even that many reports or rumors or anything to really talk about. Last year, at least there was, some weird rumors that we got to talk about. But yeah, I don't know. I'm very interested to see if the Phillies do anything the rest of this offseason. I think they will, but I'm curious to see what the outfield move is because I think that's inevitable. I just don't know if it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be a satisfying move, to be honest. I'm worried about it. I think they're going to do something a little underwhelming, and I don't think it's going to pan out. But we'll see. A
Yep,
lot of offseason left, so plenty of time to
no
figure it
doubt.
out. And maybe they get Sasaki, and we feel way better about things. I don't know. Anything you want to say before we sign off?
Nope, I think we're all good.
All right. Thank you guys for watching. We had a lot of people in here for not having been live for a while. So we really appreciate all of you. And again, keep
Absolutely.
your eye out for the shorter videos on free agent targets and trade targets and all that type of stuff, rumors or whatever. Because me and Drew are going to be hopping back on now that the offseason's kind of been in full swing. And the Phillies are lacking behind. But thank you guys again for watching. We appreciate all you. God bless. And we will see you guys on the next one. Peace.
Peace out, guys.